What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So I've been retesting some lossless scaling again lately and comparing it to some other frame generation, including in-game, and while it still has its little hiccups here and there, it's much better and improved in all of the updates since the last time I've tried it out. And I do want to highlight it here in Space Marine 2 because it doesn't have any in-game frame gen or anything yet, and lossless scaling is actually pretty good in the game. So here on Steam we have lossless scaling, and I'm going to go ahead and launch that and get it ready to go. And I'm not going to use any of the scaling modes or scaling types with this. I'm just going to use the frame generation option in lossless scaling for now. And I'm going to be using the newer 2.3 option in here. I'm also going to be on the X2 mode, which from my understanding is a little bit more CPU, GPU heavy, but does have a bit better quality. I'm trying out X3 and X4 as well, but let me know your guys' experience there. And then besides that, I am also having it draw the FPS because my MSI Afterburner is only going to show the base FPS and all the other information, but not the actual FPS with frame generation. So let's go ahead and launch into Space Marine 2 and check out some lossless scaling in here. Now, real quick, I do want to take a look at the settings before we activate any lossless or anything, and I'm just at 720p right now with this, quality on FSR 2, and then we have motion blur off here, and settings are medium for some textures, low on everything else, and then I believe I have medium down here for one more on the lighting there. So we got that going for that. We hit continue and we get into our barge area, which performance here is in general pretty good anyways. It runs fine here. It's not a hard area to run, so it's usually pretty smooth. But if we go ahead and kick on our lossless scaling frame gen, which I'll just do really quickly here, I don't have a hotkey set up yet, so we'll just do it this way. And then there we go. We'll go back to about 55 FPS before it kicks in. And then after the kick in, we are going to come down to around 42 as our base FPS, as it's doing what it does and uses resources and stuff like that. But it's not really noticed that much, at least not as much as it used to be prior to some updates. This is still actually really smooth. They've gotten rid of a lot of the stutter and jankiness here. And even though it lowers some of the base performance, it still feels really good here on the Ally X and looks good on the screen. There's still some ghosting here and there and artifacting and stuff like that. But when you're in the heat of battle and playing, a lot of that I don't notice as much. Now, getting into it here with a little bit more of the gameplay, we're around 25 to 30 FPS in this area. This first planet's actually some of the hardest to run missions. A lot of the rest of the game runs pretty good, but lossless scaling holds its own here pretty well. I remember using this before some of the updates, and when your base FPS was this low, it would really affect the way that lossless scaling worked. You would have worse ghosting and artifacting, input latency would get pretty rough and all of that, but that's not near as bad as it used to be, and input latency actually still feels pretty good. And we have some areas in this mission where you can get down to 20, 22 FPS, and lossless still keeps up with that and doubles the frame rate, and still, in my opinion, did make the experience for me feel better here on the Ally X with the higher refresh rate screen and everything. It's not all about frames, it's about frame time and input latency and all that as well, but in this single player here, I thought this was actually pretty helpful, and I prefer playing it this way, at least until they give us in-game frame gen and update the game, and then I'll be interested to see what the difference is there. And in areas like this where the game actually has a higher base FPS and it runs much easier, you can really see lossless go here where it gets up to 100 FPS and does a great job, and it feels like it's playing at 100 FPS, which is something that I really like. Again, it didn't used to be that good in my prior videos. It used to be a little bit more messy on screen, have more input latency, and have a lot more trouble with that lower base FPS under like 40. But a lot of that has been fixed in a lot of the updates for lossless, and I find it to be much more useful now than I did before, especially for games like this that I just really love playing on these handhelds like Space Marine 2, but in some areas really struggle with the frame rate even without lossless on using resources. But I find it to be much more playable and enjoyable with this turned on with the higher refresh rate screen, and just taking advantage of it here, and it plays really well. So that's pretty much going to do it. I'm working on some other lossless and frame gen videos, and I happen to be using this to play some Space Marine, and I was really impressed. Sure, it's not perfect, but it's come a long way, and it's certainly making this game feel really good on the Ally X for me. And those of you that are curious, yes, it's working the same over on the Legion Go as well, and helping performance there. That's something I'll probably highlight in the future as well. Alright guys, thanks a lot for coming to check out the video as always. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.